The Law Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube, is now part of the Red 5 network. Red 5 is a network of podcast shows aimed at bringing great quality content, especially Star Wars. And so look forward to some awesome collaborations on the Red 5 network with the Law Be With You podcast show.
There's one. Set for stun.
Welcome to the Law Be With You podcast show. I'm your host, Azzy. Hope you're keeping safe and well in the times that we are living in. So, guys, I was kind of perusing the internet and having a look at as I do from time to time, and saw some additional fandom arguments in Star Wars, and I'm like, wow, man! As a Star Wars community, we really know how to argue with each other, and I saw my good friends at Most Things Kenobi getting kind of chipping in and saying, "Come on, guys, they need to stop the arguments and need to have a bit more respect for each other and whatnot." And I totally agreed with Most Things Kenobi, who have a fantastic show. Leanne and Lauren are passionate about Star Wars. Have a really amazing podcast. Go and check them out. They're really down to earth, really humble, really honest about Star Wars, and I'm really glad to see them kind of talking about fandom and tweeting out a message, to the Star Wars universe, saying, "Come on, guys, let's sort this out," sort of thing. So, well done there, Most Things Kenobi, and like I said, they have an awesome show as well. I've engaged with them a few times, and they're really friendly, and they got a great show. So, I would echo what they've said there in terms of that, and I'm going to talk about this more in the next segment coming up, about why I think fans are so passionate about Star Wars, because I don't think it's just that the fans just want to always argue, or that it's just one of those things. There are reasons for it, and I'm hoping to kind of deconstruct some of those reasons as well in the next segment coming up. But just another thing before I forget is I want to give another shout out, and that's to Detention Block AA23, another podcast show. They're also on YouTube as well, who are really positive about fandom. They love Star Wars. They're a group of guys that just like talk about Star Wars, talk about how Star Wars brought them together and really boosted their friendship, that they have Star Wars in common. And I've engaged with those guys as well and talked to them on the internet and whatnot. And they have a novel show they have a novel sort of idea from A New Hope. They're sort of the detention block, AA23, and that they take prisoners into their detention block, and those prisoners are their guests that are on their show. Really like what they're doing there. So guys, keep it up as well, because you're doing some awesome things as well. There are like a loads of shows that I will probably need to do shout outs for, but I'll leave it just at those ones for now. But yeah, get into these arguments in fandom. There are a lot of arguments within the Star Wars fandom. Now, let's be honest, it's not only Star Wars that has arguments. Lord of the Rings has probably the same sort of things going on. And even the comic book universes, Marvel, DC, they all have it. But Star Wars seems to be the most emotive and get the most passionate and end up going into full-on lightsaber battles, verbal lightsaber battles, and keyboard warriors going for it. It does seem to be a Star Wars thing, and so in the next segment, I'm going to try and deconstruct some of these ideas on a more sort of spiritual and metaphorical level. Of some of the things that are going on with Star Wars, especially talking about monomyth and talking about escapism, two of the really big themes of Star Wars, as to why I feel fans do get very emotional about Star Wars, and why they go full on keyboard warrior mode because of this. So we'll back with you very soon in the next segment on the Law Be With You podcast show. So in Star Wars, you have these sort of motifs, you have these tropes that are these archetypal patterns in nature, in the subconscious thing. The Jungian, if you're into Jungian archetypes, they would say these are sort of psychic phenomenon, patterns on the unconscious level. You have your own personal unconscious, which is your that place of thought that is unconscious to you. But then in the archetypes, in the Jungian archetypes, there would be a collective unconscious, and that collective unconscious is I almost think of it like a Wi-Fi network. I don't know where the router is. I don't know. If you think of Wi-Fi, you have your broadband router, and then you have your mobile phone or tablet computer or laptop or other devices, whether it be an Apple Watch or whatever it may be, or your Samsung Watch that connects to your Wi-Fi. But obviously, you always need something to broadcast it. You always need a router. So I don't know where the router is in this sort of unconscious network. But the collective unconscious, I tend to think of it as almost like Wi-Fi, and you've got this broadcast on an unconscious level, and that collective unconscious is this sort of network of conscious or unconscious thought. And from this unconscious realm or network is the idea of the archetypes are coming from there. So you get from that the idea of dreams. You get the idea of religious imagery, religious symbolism, and a lot of those sort of metaphysical ideas. Why is that relevant to Star Wars, though? Why is that relevant to the hero's journey? Why is that relevant to sort of modern day ideas on monomyth? Is because when you see fans arguing about Star Wars, they're arguing over something that's had a real impression on their lives, something that's really impacted them in a almost spiritual sort of way. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that's into Star Wars is religious. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is this: on some level, you tend to find that those who are impacted by Star Wars, as well as other franchises like Lord of the Rings, and there's loads of other franchises like that, but anyone that's impacted by a proper monomyth story, it's almost as if it's a spiritual experience for them. It's almost as if it's always impacted them on a deeper level than just liking the movie, and it tends to be two sort of branches to it: the metaphysical idea of whether it's sort of the monomyth and a sort of metaphysical framework, or escapism. They just buy into the idea that they want to escape from the world they're in on some level, and this does it. Now, Star Trek does the same thing as well, and there are a plethora of franchises that do a similar thing, especially when it comes to escapism. There's a million franchises that can really get you there with escapism. When it comes to monomyth, it's a bit different, and I've already explained that already. But bearing in mind that when we're looking and trying to deconstruct why there's so many issues in the Star Wars fandom, and there are a lot of issues in the Star Wars fandom, and I do hope that we get to a point in Star Wars where the fans are treating each other better, because we don't need to constantly be, even if we disagree. And obviously in Star Wars, I think there'll always be disagreement in Star Wars, especially if you have someone like Kathleen Kennedy running Disney Lucasfilm, and the sort of team that she has around her. There's going to be sort of contention there. But I think as fandom, and I love fandom, Christian Fandom Geek loves fandom. We love fandom. I love to engage with fandom. With talking to you, who are listening to me right now, listening to the show, I think we need to have more respect for each other. I think we need to be honest and deconstruct these sort of things that we are doing. But I think we need to sort of also treat each other better. I think we're not going to always respect each other's views necessarily, but I think we need to kind of evolve and become better people in terms of actually how we engage with each other. Yeah, I think that's important. But I think understanding this, if you listen to this show, if you're a Star Wars fan, and I know a lot of you guys that listen to this show are Star Wars fans, these are some of the real reasons I think why we love Star Wars so much, or why we kind of have a lot of emotional investment in Star Wars. It's not just a film that we just like. It does link to your childhood. It links to when you were a kid. It links to the memories you had as a kid, and you know how you enjoyed these films growing up. Yeah, but not just that. There is a sort of spiritual side to it, and like I say, you may not even think of yourself as spiritual, but there is this sort of spiritual side, this metaphysical side, this Jungian archetypal side, where on this sort of personal unconscious and then the collective unconscious level, you've tapped into that. And so you've tapped into this universal framework that seems to kind of connect through different realms, through different cultures, through different eras, and you've tapped into that, and you recognize this the hero's journey story, and you've bought into that. And so just thinking about these things, these are some of the reasons why I love Star Wars so much, why you love Star Wars so much. And sometimes it's good to elucidate that. Sometimes it's good to talk about why, you know, and deconstruct it in a way why we're so invested in Star Wars and other franchises that follow this sort of same format, this same motif, same archetypes. So what I would say from this, coming towards the end of this little episode and this little reflection on it, is if you're somebody who's religious, especially, like, and obviously, you know, myself being a Christian and having a show called Christian Fandom Geek, you know, that is something that should play out in terms of how we're treating each other, because obviously we want our religious belief or convictions to show in how we're treating each other, even if it's Star Wars and we're not happy with somebody else's view, or we're not happy with somebody else's argument on Star Wars. Our conviction for trying to be good people should be playing out there. And if you're kind of religious or a bit spiritual or not really that religious, you'll have your own sort of convictions and reasons and moral code. Going back to moral codes, most things Kenobi, go back to the moral codes again. You'll have your own sort of moral code on that. But ultimately, we all need to recognise, and it will be good to recognise that we're all connecting with Star Wars, and we're all coming from a different, you know, aspect of why we're connecting with Star Wars. But actually, probably the main thing that's really brought us together is those aspects, is those parts that I mentioned earlier of escapism and monomyth. And some folks won't really know that. They'll just be into it but won't know why. But for those of us who kind of know about that or are listening to this show now, so now you do know about it, there is that deeper unconscious level, there is that deeper metaphysical, almost spiritual level. And actually recognizing that, it would be a good thing to recognize that actually it would be good for us to know that there are things in common that we have for why we love this great franchise. And yes, we can talk about Kathleen Kennedy, and we can talk about Pablo Hidalgo, and we can talk about those who we might not be agreeing with, whom we think are not steering the ship the direction that we want it to go. But ultimately, we can also look for the good things as well, like Mandalorian. Mandalorian's amazing at the moment, so that's a good thing. Anyway, thank you for joining me on my musing on Star Wars and monomyth, and we'll be with you again very soon on the Law Be With You podcast show.